Imagine this. The entire United States Senate thinks they finally have you. You're sitting in a room full of cameras, and this is live on television. Millions of Americans watching. The most powerful men in the country are pointing fingers at you, telling you to give up names. And all you have to do is talk. Just talk, and you walk free. But you don't say a word. That's exactly what happened to one man in 1952. His name was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. And what he did that day didn't just save him. It changed the entire game of power in America. To understand why Bumpy stayed silent, you have to understand where he came from. Harlem in the 1940s and 50s was its own world. It had its own music, its own style, its own rules. And it had its own economy. One that the government didn't control, couldn't tax, and didn't want to talk about in polite company. Bumpy Johnson ran that world. He wasn't just a street guy. People in Harlem called him Robin Hood. He gave money to families who couldn't pay rent. He made sure kids had food. He was feared, but he was also respected in a way that very few men ever are. But here's the thing about power. It's never free. To keep Harlem running his way, Bumpy had made a deal with the most dangerous organization in America, the Italian mob, specifically the Genovese family, one of the 5 most powerful crime families in New York. It wasn't a friendship, it was business. They needed Bumpy's access to Harlem. Bumpy needed their protection and their supply lines. Neither side loved the arrangement, but both sides needed it. Now here's where it gets interesting. In 1951 and 1952, a senator named Estes Kefauver did something no one had ever done before. He put organized crime on television. The Kefauver Committee, a Senate investigation, traveled city to city, dragging mob figures in front of cameras. And America couldn't look away. People gathered around TV sets in their living rooms. It was the biggest thing on television at the time. Kefauver's goal was simple: pull back the curtain. Show America that the mob wasn't just a movie story. It was real, it was deep, and it had connections everywhere. And they wanted Bumpy Johnson, because Bumpy was the connection point. He was the bridge between the Italian families and Harlem's underground. If he talked, he could blow the whole thing open. So they put him in that chair. And they gave him a choice: testify against the Genovese family, give up names, dates, details, or face contempt of court and go to prison. Simple choice, right? Not for Bumpy. Bumpy Johnson sat in that room. Cameras on him. Senators are leaning forward. The whole country is watching. And he said nothing. Not because he was scared. Not because he didn't know the answers. He said nothing because he understood something those senators didn't. If he talked, if he gave up the Genovese family, yes, maybe some Italian mobsters go to prison. But what happens to Bumpy next? The deal that protected Harlem collapses overnight. The agreement that kept his community from being swallowed up by outside forces, gone. He loses his leverage, he loses his position, and whoever fills that vacuum next might not care about Harlem the way he did. Bumpy didn't stay silent to protect gangsters. He stayed silent to protect a system, a fragile, complicated, imperfect system that was keeping his people standing. In a country where black communities had almost no political power, no legal protection, no seat at any real table, Bumpy had built something, a kind of underground sovereignty. And he wasn't going to hand it over to the U.S. Senate on live television. He took the contempt charge. He went to prison, and when he came out, his reputation wasn't destroyed. It was bigger than ever. Here's what most people miss about Bumpy Johnson. He wasn't just a criminal who got lucky. He was a strategist who understood power better than most politicians. He knew that in a world designed to keep him out, silence was sometimes the most powerful thing you could say. Staying quiet wasn't a weakness. It was a calculated move that preserved everything he'd spent years building. And it worked. The Genovese family never forgot that Bumpy had the chance to bury them, and didn't. That debt kept Harlem protected for years. One man's silence, bigger than any testimony could have ever been. Bumpy Johnson wasn't perfect. Far from it. But in 1952, in that Senate room, he made a decision that almost nobody else would have made. He chose his people over his freedom. And that, more than anything else, is why Harlem never forgot his name. If you want to see more stories like this, people who played the game differently, make sure you subscribe. The next story might just change how you see power forever.